Welcome to Spirit of the Midwest, a show featuring interviews and stories that expose the deep values and pride found in the heart of America. My name is Wesley Noble, and I'm here today with my co-host, CK Hicks.
And we're here with Christian Gideon, who is a wedding photographer based in Springfield, Missouri. He specializes in artistically done photojournalistic style weddings, portraits. And then from his Twitter, I also see that he enjoys waking up in a foreign land. And I've met him personally. We did lunch once, and I know he just enjoys life and loves what he does. So Christian, thanks so much for taking time with us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
So as you, obviously the kind of the purpose of this show is to get a snapshot of people who grew up in the Midwest and, live and work in that area specifically, or have gone on to other places and are kind of taking pieces of what they've done elsewhere. And so one of the main things that we're trying to do is sort of figure out what about growing up in this part of the country has made you who you are, whether you've stayed or gone or somewhere else. So could you give us just a real snapshot background of kind of where you grew up and how it led you to where you are now?
Yeah, I grew up in Ozark, Missouri, so just south of Springfield, Missouri. Small town of about 15,000 people. It's pretty. I describe it as a sleepy town. And that's one of the things that really drew me into your podcast is kind of what you like to showcase is so much of what I try to showcase in life. I have a lot of pride about where I come from, and in my industry and in any kind of artistic industry, a lot of people consider the Midwest flyover country, and I'm utterly determined to prove that it's not just a place where, the times are slow and that limits you artistically or limits you in anything you do. So I have a lot of pride there. One big thing that I hope that kind of comes out in my work and the way I approach things is my family moved to this area in the 1840s. So really early on in the history of this area, and growing up, that has always been instilled in me, that hard work ethic, kind of make things happen on your own. Don't wait for other people to necessarily hand you things, make your own breaks, push your own limits. So that the mindset of even when my early ancestors, family members came here is still kind of alive in me today. It's obviously a lot different. I'm not trying to farm, the Rocky Hills here, but there's a lot of parallels still there, I guess, in what I do and try to make it from in an area that, like I said earlier, a lot of people kind of overlook.
Sure.
Yeah. So Christian, CK mentioned that you are a photographer, do a lot of like artistic art. What do you call it? Like art quality photography? It's not just like casual photography. It's like stuff you would actually put up in a gallery.
Yeah, I would hope so. The word fine art in my industry gets thrown around a lot. And I've tried not to label myself as fine art necessarily, because to me, whether I'm shooting a wedding or a portrait session or documenting some kind of real life event, it's all about connections for me. It's all about the human condition, how people interact, celebration of life. But I try to document that in a fine art way. So I never want to throw fine art out there because I think people have certain expectations for that. And when I talk to potential clients, whether that be commercial work or weddings or anything, I always focus on the connection. I tell people with weddings that I couldn't tell you the top 5 like wedding dress designers in the industry or anything like that, but I love the celebration of life that are weddings, and that's why I photograph them. And so I always focus on the connection part, but really showing it from an artistic standpoint. That's the great thing about the internet is it allows, if you have 200 guests, 250 guests at your wedding, it allows everyone to see those wedding images now, and even people that didn't attend. Whereas 15 years ago, your wedding album that you may have on your coffee table was kind of the only way people saw those images. So a new industry or a new frame of mind in the way to photograph weddings has kind of emerged out of that, because we are able to share those moments with the whole world, whereas 15 years ago it wasn't a possibility. So that's kind of where my vision has evolved out of, is that that need or that opportunity, I guess. So, yeah.
Well, and one of the things that is plainly visible through your photography is the emotional connection between people, which is something that, as you say, is a great part of your history. And so if you're looking back at where you've come from, it's obviously influenced just your artistic style, because the shots you take are very intimate, they're very personal. It's kind of like that moment, could be preserved, that couldn't really be recreated because it's such a special time. There's some you take from the top of buildings, and you take them when they're floating in a lake, and or just all these
Yeah.
different types of things. But it's so personal, and that obviously is a big deal to you, the relationship side of thing. And that's something that really fascinates me about this area of the country is we uh, it's like kind of like this pride of life and the personality and the one-on-one connections that we build. Whether it's grabbing lunch at a cafe, or talking over the internet or whatever, it's driven by this desire to connect with people and to know people. And I think that, to me, is one of the ways that really sets this area of the country apart from a lot of places I've been. I mean, have you found that as well, or what are some distinctives about the Midwest that you have seen as you've traveled all over the place?
No, I'm glad you said that, because that's something I always want to try to get across anytime I talk to somebody about what I do. That's one huge advantage here. I realize now, where I'm at, that I didn't necessarily embrace growing up. Um, for example, I went to grab coffee this morning before we sat down, and you walk into a coffee shop on the square here in Springfield, and you run into three or four people, or even the person making your coffee, and the typical Midwest mindset is to engage that person and talk to that person, look them in the eye, talk about the weather, talk about their morning. And I found that, when you go to New York City, for example, everyone's so busy. It's the exact opposite of that. It's put your head down. You have somewhere to be. My time is most important to me, not yours. And I realized how much of an advantage growing up in this type of environment has been, because today in photography, with what I do with connections and portraits, the biggest thing for me is getting the people I'm working with to be comfortable and to feel at ease in front of the camera, and to realize that I'm on their side. I'm not some pushy photographer. I'm not going to make them do something corny or out of their element. And those conversations I've had my whole life, walking into a coffee shop or walking into school, or just walking down the street in my neighborhood, all those little bitty conversations and that constant frame of mind of engaging people has come back around as a skill set in what I do, and allow me to engage those people. I show up on someone's wedding day, and up until that point, it may be all email communication or all Skype. And so I have to get them to trust me pretty quickly that I'm, I'm a decent guy. I'm not going to do anything to ruin their wedding day, and that they can be comfortable with me. And that skill set has really allowed me to connect with those people quickly and on a real level, not superficially. And as soon as I can do that, that's when I can start making really beautiful images with those people. So that's something I've realized in the last year, is this whole way of life here has really fostered that skill set for me, kind of unknowingly.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And so I think a lot of it comes back to the intentionality that we have. It's like you getting up early and getting coffee before we talk, or I saw you answered my email at a pretty early hour this morning, and then
Yeah.
but that's part of it, is the intentionality of wanting to be ready for something, and so that when you do meet somebody and you engage them, there's this personality and there's this flavor to the conversation, because the two people are just genuinely interested in meeting other people and talking with them, and just enjoying working through different things they're working on, and just enjoying life. And I've spent my entire life in this part of the country, but I've seen that no matter where I've been. Like, you can just see it in people. You're like, you're from the Midwest, aren't you? There's
Yeah.
something about that. So that's really cool, and that was a great soundbite from you too, about the just walking in and having those conversations, because I think that's something that is looked over. But when you spend a little bit of time here, we used to joke, because the people wave on the country roads back where I'm from, and you'd go somewhere else and you wouldn't see as much waving. And we're like, what's wrong with people? What's going on here? Why?
Yeah, that's definitely true in my experiences. Yeah, it's like I said earlier, it's almost look if you're waving, you're in trouble somewhere else. In a lot of bigger cities. So yeah.
And when I heard you talk about that, I agree. Intentionality, but also authenticity really comes to mind as something that is prevalent in the Midwest and that people really strive towards. And that's I see in your own work. So how do you get that authenticity out of people and be authentic towards them?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think so much of it is just the way I started. I started, photography late in life, for most people, and so much of it was asking just friends of mine, hey, let's. I have this idea for a shoot. I have this idea I want to get across. Let's go. Do you have a couple hours during the week? Let's go shoot. And I would take those friends and do these hopefully attention grabbing portraits with them. And they weren't models. They weren't people who spent a lot of time in front of the camera. And again, it kind of goes back to I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel with the way I shoot. I'm not trying to go viral. I'm not trying to make something that shocks the world. With everything I do, I want people to look back in 20, 30 years and those images not be outdated or look like a passing fad. I want them to actually grow in value. And that's one of the reasons that I don't do a lot of crazy editing, a lot of crazy artificial lighting and things like that, because I want things to feel authentic. I want them to look like real life, but maybe see real life as they haven't seen it before. So yeah, that's a big part of it. Is there's that intentional frame of mind to shoot things in the realest way I can, and in today's photography world where everybody's trying to hit that home run and make that one image and get all the likes on Facebook or get more Instagram followers, sometimes real is refreshing, and I hope that that's sustainable because
yeah, definitely. And that even comes out in the series that you did, like the day in the IKEA.
yeah.
It's all about the realness of that situation, no matter where you are. And I think that plays right into this mentality you're talking about wherever you are, you're taking this with you, and you're trying to find what it is about that connects people and creates these moments, and that could really be anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the psychology of what draws people into images and what makes an interesting image is always fascinating to me. So a lot of that's basically what we've talked about is looking inside myself and seeing what I guess I can offer the world to make an interesting image. So yeah, it's so, and I think that's as real and authentic as it can be. Is see what I have to offer the world, not what the world wants to see. Because if you're constantly trying to make images for everybody else, you're going to get burnt out pretty quick. And I think that's kind of a dead end road for most photographers, but a road that most photographers seem to want to go down. So it's kind of it's just a lot easier to wake up in the morning and know I want to shoot for myself, I guess.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that IKEA project. That cracks me up every time I look at it.
Yeah, that was kind of a strange deal. It was not planned out. It was me and a couple of friends were on a road trip and had my gear in the car. We were going to buy a few picture frames, and we started laughing and joking, and one thing led to another, and yeah, so that was never intended to really like go viral or take off like that. It was more meant to be sent to to our friends to make them laugh, and then people were like, "You have to put this on the internet." And when we put that on the site, I think it's had about 500,000 hits now on my website at least, and it's been on over 200 or 300 different websites.
Man.
But it's been great because it's really not what I do at all in terms of the way I shoot, but it gets people in, kind of makes them laugh, and then a lot of times the people will stay on my site and they end up working with me, for other reasons. So it's kind of a funny deal.
Very cool. Well, another question about your craft here. So since I have known you on Twitter and followed your work, I wanted to ask this question to you. And when I was younger, I used to be really into photography and kind of mostly my own laziness, but also partly this, just dropped out. But one of the things I struggled with was I struggled with balancing living uh, in the moment that I'm taking, with also capturing the moment with my camera. So how do you, like, as you go out and go around to all these amazing cool places all over the country, how do you live in that moment and enjoy the moment yourself, but also be able to capture it with your camera?
Oh man, that's a great question. In regards to weddings, I think this year I shot 15 to 20 weddings out of state. So I was in little bitty small towns in Arkansas, New York, Brooklyn, the West Coast. So no two weddings or no two cities, towns are alike. And that frame of mind is really important of going in there. And when someone hires me, I look at as myself as not just a photographer, but someone that is emotionally investing in their day to capture those moments in a way that they can actually be in those moments more. And by that I mean, I have this really weird thing that sometimes after I shoot a wedding, especially when I'm really emotionally invested in it and there's a good story going on and people are having a blast, I'll take all these wonderful images and then sit down a day or two later and look at them, and there's images I don't remember taking. And it's always blown me away. And what I've come to realize is when I'm documenting and trying to make artistic decisions, I am very emotionally invested in the day, but I do not experience the moments the way the people in the wedding experience the moments. And that is a great thing, actually, because it allows them to not worry about where I am, what images I'm taking. The clients I work with have to trust me. And when they trust me, they get better images, but they get to enjoy their day. They know that I'm there. They can focus more on their family and their friends or their future spouse or what's happening instead of wondering what their photographer's doing. And my way of investing in them is getting those images and not worrying about my own being there, I guess. It's almost like I have this sacrifice. I sacrifice some of the moments to make sure they have those moments. And it's kind of hard to get out what I'm trying to say, I guess. But
no, it makes sense. So how would that change if you were shooting something like for yourself? Like, does that mentality shift, or would you still kind of sacrifice the moment to save it for the other people who were there?
It does change a little bit for myself. If you follow me on Twitter, my website, I shoot a ton of personal work in between, I guess, professional projects. And I actually try not to draw that line too much. But when I do shoot personal work, that is kind of my time to have a little more control over the images being made. That's a great time for me to experiment, to grow as a photographer. So I use my personal work to be more about exerting some of that directing and some of that trying new things from a technical aspect. So when I do go into a wedding, that it's second nature to me.
Gotcha.
So yeah, but I enjoy both of those equally. I love documenting weddings. I love the real moment side, but also during the wedding day too, I like to take control for an hour or so and do some of those editorial type portraits. And that's why I do shoot so much personal work. So when I get that time to do some creative editorial style portraits, I can flow back and forth seamlessly, and from having control to being a fly on the wall. And I found that a lot of photographers can't do both. They either like to document and stay back and not talk or be out of the frame, or they like to have 100% control and control every little detail. And I pride myself on being able to flow back and forth between those two. And I think that comes from trying not to have an ego about it. I always say, to make good images, I have to check my ego at the door. Because that's one thing about weddings that's always fascinates me is you could go to my website and see these amazing editorial, documentary, artistic images from the past, but every wedding you show up to is a fresh start. And if you don't bring that 100% locked in mentality to every wedding, then you're gonna get burnt out, and you're ultimately gonna make images that start getting boring.
So do you see the personal work you do, the personal shoots, as kind of a way to recalibrate and maybe enjoy some of the moments yourself and be able to kind of refocus and refuel so that when you go back in, you can really be selfless as that photographer to help other people really capture their day?
Yeah, I never thought about it in terms of recalibrating, but that's the absolute perfect word for it.
Hmm.
It kind of centers me. It allows me to, but also to make those decisions quicker and more seamlessly. With so many weddings, they are just so fast moving, and when I'm able to make those artistic decisions more intuitively, as opposed to stopping and having to think it through, it ultimately makes me a better photographer, which puts a better product out on the table. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. I never really thought of it that way, but that's exactly what it does.
Very good.
Hmm. Well, Christian, I'm curious. On the show, we really want to ask people for wisdom that they've learned over the past years, and I'm wondering, what is your advice to your younger self?
Oh
Just
man,
things
oh
you've
that
learned
that's
from your craft, things you've
that's
learned
a good
from the
question.
Midwest.
No, that's a great question. One another huge advantage I have looking back on my life is, I said earlier I didn't get into photography until my mid 20s, and that I wouldn't change anything about it. I think a lot of young photographers these days, the access to really good gear, whether that's an iPhone or a SLR, is there for almost anybody. Whereas it wasn't necessarily when I was growing up.
Hmm.
And so it's easy to grab a camera and think you're working towards being a professional really quickly. And I think that can be a detriment sometimes to people. I often tell people when I was about 22, I went to China for 3 or 4 weeks,
Hmm.
and on an international business college trip, and went all over the country, Shanghai, Beijing, countryside,
Nice.
the Great Wall, and it blew my mind. It was one of the most fascinating, beautiful places on earth. But I don't have any images from that trip. None. I didn't take a camera. Cell phone cameras were meaningless then, and all I have is the memories from it. And I think there's something to be said for getting out and living life before you get into photography, making mistakes, traveling, getting your heart broke once or twice.
Mhm.
It's a lot like music in that mindset. Is you have to have something to say, and when you're 14, 15, 16, 18, whatever, and you just pick up a camera, you don't really know what you want to say yet.
Hmm.
And that has been a huge blessing to me. Is I've been through a lot of struggles and great things in life before I even really picked up a camera.
That's
And
super
I think
fascinating.
that helped me know what I wanted to say, if that makes sense.
No, it does, and that's just so interesting the way you describe having the experiences, but then not having documentation. It's like Wesley asked the question about documenting, and I think that too sometimes when I'm walking down the street and I see the way the sun is hitting a flower or the building or something, I pull out my phone, take a picture, if I don't have an SLR on me, and then sometimes you're thinking, well, but am I preserving this moment because I'm actually going to reflect on it? Or am I preserving this moment because I want to share it with someone and explain the situation and what was going on? Or is this just a natural, flippant reaction to take a picture? And does it actually tell a story? And does it actually tell something about the phase of life that we're in or whatever else? Like, what does it do other than, just this sort of knee jerk reaction to pull out the phone and take a picture? And the way that you just described the storytelling based on your experiences before you were kind of in the profession of documenting things is super fascinating, I think, because it goes back even to what you said earlier about, you have the ancestors and you're really fascinated with the 1800s and just their progression and their story as they went places. It's neat to hear that you want to be intentional, even if that means what some people might view as like sacrificing, these different situations. Like you're wanting to get back to like, well, but what are we doing here? What's the story about? And what are we actually telling? And have we actually experienced enough to tell that story? And that, so that, for me personally, that's wildly fascinating because I love that angle on life where you're not trying to just obsessively capture every moment. You're trying to, there's weight behind it too.
Yeah, no, for sure. The more I shoot, the longer I've been a photographer, the less I want to shoot. Exactly what you just said. And I hope that doesn't come off snobby. It just um, it takes certain things that to get me going, just like you said, because I think I've kind of gone through that phase of shooting everything in front of me, and I want my images to mean something, And I'm not knocking the person who, like you just said, your own experience walking down the street. I do that all the time myself. But professionally, there's less and less I want to shoot, and I think that's a good thing. I think that means I'm looking for better stories. I'm looking for more intense situations.
That's excellent.
Love that. Well, thank you so much, Christian, for joining us today, for being our guinea pig with our very first episode. It's been really fun, and you had some really cool stuff to say.
Thanks for having me. You definitely going into it with no pre-planned idea. You had some great questions that I could hopefully share a little bit of insight on.
No, it's been great, and we've so appreciated getting to touch base with you, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah.
So as we close out the show, you can get to know Christian by visiting his website at christiangideonphotography.com. He's also on Twitter at Christian Gideon. And you can learn more about this show by visiting spiritofthemidwest.net. Thanks for tuning in, and please join us next time as we celebrate the spirit of the Midwest.